The cemetery was painfully quiet except for the gentle rustle of autumn leaves and the distant hum of traffic. I stood alone beside David's casket, my black dress catching the cool October breeze. The funeral director had arranged for 6 pallbearers, all strangers David had worked with, men who barely knew him but showed more respect in one afternoon than my entire family had in the 3 years since our wedding. I clutched the single white rose I'd brought, my wedding ring catching what little sunlight filtered through the gray clouds. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. 27 years old, and I was burying the love of my life with no one by my side. Not my parents, Robert and Linda Hayes, who had disowned me the day I announced my engagement to David. Not my younger sister Claire, who had blocked my number after choosing sides. Not even my best friend since childhood, Jessica, who had promised she'd think about it when I'd called her sobbing 3 days ago. The priest's words felt hollow as they echoed across the nearly empty cemetery. We gather here today to remember David Michael Chen, beloved husband. Beloved by whom? I wondered bitterly. Certainly not by the family who had raised me to be better than this. Not by the people who saw David's last name and decided he wasn't worth their time. Not by the so-called loved ones who couldn't see past their own prejudices to support me in my darkest hour. As the casket was lowered into the ground, I made a promise to David and to myself. They had shown me exactly what their love was worth. Now I would show them what their absence had cost them. 6 months later, the inheritance lawyer's office smelled of leather and old books. Mr. Whitmore, David's family attorney, sat across from me with a thick folder and an expression that suggested he had news that would change everything. "Mrs. Chen," he began, adjusting his glasses, "I apologize for the delay in settling your husband's estate. As you know, the tech startup he founded was in preliminary stages when he passed. What you didn't know was that Google had been quietly evaluating it for acquisition." My heart stopped. David had always been secretive about his work, spending long nights in his home office, talking excitedly about revolutionary algorithms and changing the world. I'd supported him emotionally, but never fully understood the technical aspects. "The acquisition went through last week," Mr. Whitmore continued, sliding a document across the mahogany desk. "The total value, after taxes and fees, comes to $47.3 million. The number didn't immediately register. I stared at the paper, reading the figure again and again. $47,300,000. "David left everything to you, of course. There's also this." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in David's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you've just learned about the money. I never told you about the acquisition talks because I didn't want to get your hopes up. But more than that, I wanted you to love me for who I was, not what I might become worth. I know your family never accepted me. I know they hurt you deeply by rejecting our marriage. I also know you're strong enough to build a life without them. But if you choose to let them know about this inheritance, that's your decision. Just remember, people's true character shows not in times of celebration, but in times of grief. I love you eternally. David." I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my purse. David was right about character. Mine was about to be tested too. The plan formed slowly, carefully. I started with social media, something I'd barely used since David's death. I created new profiles with carefully curated photos. Me in designer clothes, standing in front of my new Malibu house, holding keys to the Tesla Model S I'd bought myself for my 28th birthday. I didn't mention David or the inheritance directly. Instead, I posted about new beginnings and unexpected blessings. I shared photos of exotic vacations, Santorini, Tokyo, the French Riviera. I tagged locations at five-star restaurants and exclusive boutiques. It took exactly 3 weeks. Sarah! Oh my God, Sarah! Claire's voice was breathless with excitement when she called. I saw your Instagram. I can't believe. I mean, where have you been? We've been so worried about you. Worried? That was rich, considering she hadn't returned a single call in 6 months. Claire, I said coolly. What a surprise. Listen, I know we've had our differences, but family is family, right? Mom and Dad have been talking about you constantly. They feel terrible about everything that happened. Do they? Of course, we all do. Look, I was thinking, maybe we could meet for lunch? Catch up? I saw you were at Nobu last week, and I've been dying to try that place. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I'd love that. But I'm quite busy these days. Busy with what? Oh, just managing my investments. It's more complicated than I expected. The hook was set. Over the next month, the messages poured in. Facebook friend requests from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Text messages from high school acquaintances. Even my childhood piano teacher reached out to congratulate me on my success. But the most satisfying message came from Jessica. Sarah, honey, I am so sorry I missed David's funeral. I was going through such a rough time with my divorce, and I just couldn't handle being around that much grief. But I've been thinking about you every day. Can we please get coffee? I miss my best friend so much. I screenshotted the message and added it to my growing collection. Evidence. My parents were more calculated in their approach. They started with a carefully worded email from my father. Dear Sarah, your mother and I have been doing a lot of soul-searching lately. We realize we may have been hasty in our reaction to your marriage. We were concerned about cultural differences and worried about your future, but we can see now that we were wrong to cut off contact. We hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us. We'd love to see you soon. Love, Dad and Mom. Cultural differences. That's what they called their racism now. I waited a week before responding. I appreciate you reaching out. I'm willing to meet. But I think it's important we all acknowledge what really happened. Perhaps we could have dinner at Le Bernardin? Saturday at 7? Le Bernardin was a $300 per person restaurant in Manhattan. I knew they'd research it before agreeing. I wanted them to know exactly how much money they thought I was worth now. The family reunion was a masterpiece of performance art. I arrived at the restaurant wearing a Hermès dress that cost more than my father's monthly salary and jewelry that could have funded Claire's entire college education. They were all there. Mom and Dad, looking older and more desperate than I remembered. Claire, wearing her best dress but still looking shabby next to my outfit. And yes, even Jessica, who'd somehow finagled an invitation. Sarah! My mother cried, rushing to hug me. Oh, sweetheart, you look absolutely radiant. Thank you, I said, not returning the embrace with much enthusiasm. The dinner was excruciating. They asked careful questions about my work, complimented my jewelry, and reminisced about old times with a forced nostalgia that made my skin crawl. Jessica regaled us with stories about her divorce, dropping hints about her financial struggles. Claire mentioned her student loans several times. My father, ever the strategist, waited until dessert to make his move. Sarah, I want you to know how proud we are of what you've accomplished. We clearly underestimated your husband's potential. David's potential. Not David as a person, but his monetary value. And we were wondering, my mother chimed in, if you might want to invest in Claire's business idea. She's got this wonderful plan for a boutique fitness studio. Claire beamed. It would only take about $200,000 to get started, and I know I could pay you back with interest. Jessica cleared her throat. And I hate to ask, but I'm in such a tight spot with the divorce settlement. If you could maybe help me with my legal fees? Just $50,000 or so? I looked around the table at their expectant faces. These people who had let me bury my husband alone, who had chosen their prejudices over their love for me, who now sat here calculating how much of my grief they could convert into cash. I smiled and pulled out my phone. Before we discuss investments, I said, I want to show you all something. I opened my photo album and began scrolling through screenshots, messages from each of them over the past 6 months, either ignoring my attempts to reach out or explicitly stating they wanted nothing to do with me. I included the screenshot of Jessica's excuse about being too busy with her divorce to attend David's funeral. Their faces went white as I read each message aloud. "This one's my favorite," I said, finding Claire's text from 2 weeks after the funeral. "Stop trying to guilt trip us into accepting your choices. You made your bed when you married him." Claire's fork clattered against her plate. "Sarah, that was taken out of context? Was it?" I put the phone down and looked around the table. Because I have 6 months of context, 6 months of complete silence, 6 months of you all making it clear that David's life, and by extension my grief, meant nothing to you. My father tried to salvage the situation. We admit we made mistakes, but... Mistakes? I laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to cut glass. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose your prejudices over your daughter. You chose your narrow-minded comfort over supporting me when I needed you most. But we're here now, my mother said desperately. We're trying to make amends. You're here for my money, I corrected. Let me tell you a little story about David that you never bothered to learn. He was brilliant, yes, but more than that, he was kind. When I was sick with the flu last winter, he took a week off work to take care of me. When my grandmother died, you remember Grandma Rose, Mom? David drove me 6 hours to her funeral and held my hand through the entire service. He learned to cook my favorite foods. He listened to me cry about missing my family and never once said, "I told you so," about how you treated him. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I wasn't finished. And when he died, when I lost the most important person in my life, not one of you showed up. Not one. I buried the love of my life alone while you all sat in your houses, congratulating yourselves on being right about him. The restaurant had grown quiet around us. Other diners were pretending not to stare. "The money you're so interested in?" I continued. "It came from David's brilliant mind, his hard work, his innovation. Money that you now think entitles you to my forgiveness and my generosity. But here's what you don't understand. David's death didn't make me rich. Your absence made me realize how poor I'd been in family." I stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and opened my purse. "Dinner is on me tonight. Consider it a goodbye gift." I placed a stack of hundreds on the table, enough to cover the meal 3 times over. "Because this is the last time you'll ever see me or my money." Jessica reached for my arm. "Sarah, please, we can work this out." I pulled away. "Can we? Can you bring David back? Can you give me back the support I needed when I was drowning in grief? Can you undo 6 months of treating me like I was dead too?" She couldn't answer. I didn't think so. 1 year later, I was in David's hometown of Portland, Oregon, visiting his parents for what would have been his 32nd birthday. The Chens had welcomed me as a daughter from the day David introduced me, and they'd become my real family in the aftermath of his death. David's mother, Lee, was showing me photos of the scholarship fund we'd established in his name at his alma mater. Brilliant young programmers from underprivileged backgrounds could now pursue their dreams because of David's legacy. "He would be so proud," she said, squeezing my hand. "You've turned his success into something that will help so many people." I donated $20 million to various causes. tech education programs, immigrant support services, and a fund for widows and widowers who couldn't afford funeral expenses. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using the money my family coveted to help people they would probably never notice. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sarah, this is Claire. I know you said you never wanted to see us again, but Mom is in the hospital. She had a heart attack. Please, I know you're angry, but she's asking for you." I stared at the message for a long time. Lee noticed my expression. "Bad news?" "I'm not sure," I said honestly. "My mother is sick. My family wants me to come home." Lee studied my face. "What does your heart tell you?" My heart told me a lot of things. It told me that grief makes people do terrible things. It told me that forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. It told me that David would want me to be the bigger person. But it also told me that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt with wishful thinking. I deleted the message without responding. 2 years later, I was remarried now, to Marcus, a kind pediatrician who'd never cared about my money, and who honored David's memory by understanding that I'd always loved them both in different ways. We lived quietly in David's house, which I'd kept exactly as it was, adding only Marcus's books and his terrible coffee habit. The doorbell rang on a Saturday morning, and I opened it to find Claire standing on my doorstep. She looked older, tired, but not desperate in the way I'd expected. "Before you close the door," she said quickly, "I want you to know I'm not here for money." I almost laughed. "Then why are you here?" "Mom died last month." The words hit me like a physical blow. Whatever I'd expected her to say, it wasn't that. "The heart attack damaged her heart too much," Claire continued. "She lived for about a year after that first one, but she never really recovered." I gripped the doorframe. "Why didn't you tell you sooner?" "Because you made it clear you wanted nothing to do with us." I respected that. "But I'm here now because she left you something." Claire held out a worn shoebox. "Letters. She wrote you one every week for 2 years but never sent them. She asked me to give them to you after she died. Against my better judgment, I took the box." "I also want you to know," Claire said, "that I understand now. What we did was unforgivable. We were racist and cruel and cowardly. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for money or relationship or anything from you. I just wanted you to have those letters and to tell you that I'm sorry. Genuinely, completely sorry." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, she regretted every day what we did to you. It ate her alive. I think part of her died the day we let you bury David alone." After Claire left, I sat with the box for hours before opening it. The letters were painful to read, full of regret, self-recrimination, and desperate love. My mother had chronicled her own journey from defensive racism to genuine understanding of what she'd lost. The final letter, dated a week before her death, was the hardest. "My dearest Sarah, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I know that saying I'm sorry doesn't undo the damage we caused or bring back the support you needed when David died. But I want you to know that losing you was the greatest tragedy of my life. Greater than any prejudice I held, greater than my own death will be. You deserved a family who celebrated your love, not one who punished you for it. David deserved our respect and welcome. You both deserved our presence at his funeral, our support in your grief, our love without conditions. I failed you as a mother in the most fundamental way possible. I let fear and ignorance steal away my daughter. If I could trade places with David to give you your husband back, I would do it without hesitation. I hope your life is full of love and joy. I hope you've found family who deserves you. And I hope that someday, when the pain isn't so fresh, you might remember that despite all my failures, I never stopped loving you. Your mother, Linda." I cried for 3 hours. Marcus held me as I grieved, not just for David this time, but for my mother, for the relationship we might have had, for the complexity of forgiveness and the weight of consequences. 5 years later. The tech conference was crowded and loud, filled with young entrepreneurs pitching ideas with the same passion David had once shown. I was there as a keynote speaker, talking about using technology for social good. After my presentation, a young woman approached me, mid-20s, nervous, clutching a business plan. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Maria Santos. I was one of the recipients of the David Chen Memorial Scholarship. I just wanted to thank you." She looked so young, so hopeful, so much like David had when he'd first started dreaming big. "What are you working on?" I asked. Her face lit up. "An app that connects immigrant families with resources, legal aid, English classes, job placement. My parents came here from El Salvador, and I saw how hard it was for them to navigate everything. It was exactly the kind of project David would have loved." "I'd like to hear more about it," I said. "Are you free for coffee?" As we walked to the conference cafe, I thought about the strange mathematics of loss and legacy. David's death had cost me my original family, but given me a deeper understanding of what family should be. My family's rejection had hurt me profoundly, but taught me to value the people who show up when it matters. The money they'd all wanted so desperately was just numbers in accounts now, having meaning only when it was used to honor David's memory and help others. The revenge I'd planned had been satisfying in the moment, but ultimately hollow. The real victory wasn't in making them pay for their absence. It was in building a life so full of purpose and love that their absence no longer mattered. Maria was explaining her app's security features with the same intense focus David used to have. I found myself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. "Tell me about your funding needs," I said. "And don't lowball the number. Good ideas deserve proper support. Some stories end with dramatic confrontations and clear resolutions. Others end quietly, with choices made and lives lived deliberately." As I listened to Maria's passionate explanation of her work, I realized mine was the latter kind of story. David was gone. My original family had shown their true selves. But my life was full of chosen family, meaningful work, and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions. In the end, that was revenge enough. Living well, loving deeply, and making sure that David's legacy lived on in ways that mattered. The empty chairs at his funeral had hurt, but the full life I'd built afterward had healed me. And that, I thought, was what David would have wanted most of all.